I broke free from my toxic past, only to face the reality of my family's denial. Blocking them felt like liberation, but now I'm haunted. I am in my late 30s, happily married, a parent, a homeowner, a college graduate, and I have a few hobbies. Nonetheless, I have consistently longed for a connection with my biological family. During my childhood, whenever I inquired about them, my mother would adamantly state that they wanted nothing to do with me and did not care for me. I never grasped the reason behind it. I was raised in a household filled with abuse that is hard to convey completely. My father had the capacity to shout for hours on end literally. It was not unusual for him to begin at 9 in the morning and not cease until 3 in the morning the following day. A frequent trigger could be something as trivial as neglecting to turn off a light. To him, this indicated that I was plotting against him, attempting to elevate the utility bills so that he would lose our home and we would all end up homeless. If I was fortunate, he would enact dialogues with himself during these tirades, pretending to be me. During those moments, I was able to leave the room. Even in moments of calm, he would remain awake all night, waking me up for no apparent reason just to ask if I was awake. I would go through weeks surviving on merely 1 or 2 hours of sleep a night. By the time I reached the age of 12, he commenced efforts to groom me sexually. There was subtle sexual abuse. He showed no kindness whatsoever, and I hold no fond memories of him. There were moments when my mother could be kind, but whenever he mistreated her, which happened frequently, she would take it out on me. He labeled her crazy, and as a result, she labeled me crazy. She often made disparaging remarks. If I attempted to discuss matters with her, she would look at me with revulsion and instruct me to leave her alone. At times, she would appear normal, asking for my thoughts on various issues, but when I responded, she would erupt, "Oh, you genuinely believe I require your approval?" Other occasions would find her cheerful. "I'm getting a cookie from the kitchen. Would you like one?" If I expressed interest, she would scream that she was not my servant. If I declined, she would accuse me of thinking I was superior to everyone else. This dynamic was incessantly present in our interactions. Once, I questioned why she had me in her life if she clearly disliked me. She responded that her husband was so abusive and cruel that she desired a cute little girl to divert her attention, someone she could dress up. Instead, she got me a tomboy. On another occasion, she criticized me for my weight, asserting that the more I weighed, the more I resembled my father, and that she despised seeing my face. There was also considerable mistreatment regarding food that I prefer not to delve into now. One day, believing she was in a good mood, she approached me with a blank expression and stated, "You know, I don't love you. I never loved you or anyone. I simply do not experience those feelings. I thought you should be aware." I replied that I would remember that for the rest of my life. She became enraged and told me to be quiet. She consistently barked orders at me, typically, "quiet," or "stay," as if I were a dog. I explained to her that it was dehumanizing and asked her to at least speak to me like I was a person. It only made her angrier, and of course, she never amended her behavior. If I cried after her verbal assaults, she would inform me that I had nothing to cry over, that I was fortunate, and that my life was only going to become worse. I took her words to heart. I became suicidal but did not wish to end my life. When I confided in her about my feelings, she grew furious and attempted to take out a life insurance policy on me, or at least made the attempt. I am uncertain if she succeeded. There were countless other incidents, but those remain the most memorable. Approximately a decade ago, I tied the knot and welcomed a child. I expressed my frustrations to my mother regarding my past and made it clear that I would not accept such treatment toward myself or my new family if she wished to be involved in our lives. She acknowledged her wrongs and offered an apology. It appeared genuine. I took her at her word. In hindsight, I realize I was deceiving myself. She had not undergone any real change. She had merely altered her tactics. Instead of overt abuse, she masked it as concern. When my child faced medical concerns as an infant, which I was managing, she would say things like, "Relatives are worried about how ill your child appears. I hope they do not involve child protective services." If something slightly concerning occurred, but I remained untroubled, she would launch into a diatribe about how I should be upset, growing more incensed when I maintained my composure. She harbored resentment towards me for finding joy in life. If I traveled, she would be angered if I participated in activities she would not personally choose, or if I did not partake in something she wanted to do. If I purchased groceries for my own household, situated hours away, she would inquire what I had bought and then express disappointment if it did not include items she favored. If she spotted a photograph and noticed a vase in the background, she would obsess over it, inquiring about where it came from, its cost, and why I hadn't informed her. She was draining. On several occasions, she even accused my husband of infidelity because he, as a supervisor, takes his employees, sometimes women, to lunch. A couple of years back, I spoke with my aunt. Throughout my upbringing, my mother informed everyone that I had not been abused, that I was severely mentally ill, and that she suffered as a result. She told people I had crying fits and was depressed without cause. I clarified to my aunt that indeed, I cried after enduring hours of screaming. My aunt confessed that she had been unaware of that aspect, but urged me to forgive and move forward. More recently, I conversed with my brother. I believe he also thought I was mentally ill since my mother had been feeding him the same narrative. The only diagnosis I have ever received is partial PTSD from childhood abuse. Allegedly, it is partial, because I managed to function. Since childhood, my mother informed me that my brother and his wife despised me. She reminded me of this weekly. It leads me to question what other fabrications she shared with others regarding me. Last week, my childhood was brought up in a discussion. When I recounted the abuse to my mother, she denied everything, not only her actions, but also those of my father. She claimed that my childhood was fine and that we had wonderful experiences. When I contested her statement, she then sarcastically added, "Perhaps I just choose to remember the good moments." Furious, I told her I required her to take responsibility, that I could not forgive her or continue our communication if she would not even acknowledge the enormity of her mistreatment. Instead of responding, she started to talk over me, shouting, "I love you, I love you, I love you." I hung up. That was the final conversation we had. Since then, someone has already attempted to guilt me on her behalf. I blocked my mother's number. I disabled my voicemail since blocked numbers can still leave messages. I deactivated my Facebook account to avoid extended family interactions. I blocked her email. I even disabled my LinkedIn account. I understand she will depict herself as the perfect mother while portraying her mentally ill adult child as the one abusing her. I feel emotionally drained. It feels like I am a frightened child once again. I am anticipating unknown numbers calling and relatives attempting to make me feel guilty. Each time I check the mail, I feel a sense of dread she uses gifts to gain attention or prove that she is a wonderful mother. I am utterly exhausted from striving to be a good person and leading a normal life, only to have my blood relatives assert that I'm mentally ill regarding nearly everything. I once shared pictures of an 8-mile hike. That, apparently, was self-harm in their eyes. I take my daughter to the park. That's child abuse because she is required to walk. I engage in a local buy-nothing group, giving away items. That's mental illness because I should demand something in return. I only wish to live in tranquility, yet my relatives continually emerge to remind me of their perceptions of me. I am truly struggling with all of this. I am scarcely sleeping, facing nightmares, and I feel profoundly sad. I suppose I am mourning the mother-daughter relationship I misguidedly believed existed. I am not eating well, not exercising, and merely doing the bare minimum to maintain my home. I have been watching videos from therapists and psychologists on the effects of narcissistic abuse. Approximately 95% of what they articulate resonates with my experiences, both concerning my mother's behavior and the impact on me. I have been taking notes on how to move forward, cultivate self-esteem, manage individuals who seek to belittle me, and uncover my true self. I never recognized how many activities I shun simply because she disapproves of them. I am uncertain what I genuinely like or dislike. I am not sure who I am at my core. I feel so disoriented. I have numerous other personal matters occurring as well, amplifying the difficulty. Nothing particularly disastrous, just many transitions. Story 2. OMG. I refused to give my ex-boyfriend my chicken breast. He hid my phone, and I almost called the police over a chicken showdown. Mandatory disclaimer. This did not occur today. Approximately 1 year ago, an incident that I have named the Great Chicken Breast Incident transpired. As the anniversary approaches, I have been contemplating this evening with my friends and have finally managed to understand just how absurd that night was. It was Easter weekend in 2024, and at that time, I, 25, female, was in a rather unfortunate living arrangement with my ex-boyfriend, 30, male. We had ended our relationship in February, but could not move out of our shared apartment due to being bound by a 1-year lease, which required us to provide the landlord ample notice for replacing tenants. We had been together for about 1.5 years, living essentially as roommates with separate bedrooms and no shared schedules or resources. Generally, we purchased our own groceries. This may seem unusual for a couple, and in retrospect, it indeed was, but crucial to this story is that he was an amateur bodybuilder. Bodybuilding, especially for male competitors, comes with an astonishingly excessive amount of food consumption. There were instances where I measured out 300 grams of chicken and 500 grams of rice for a single meal for him. He even had to buy serving dishes that could accommodate his portions. Consequently, we never dined together. He had to eat based on his gym schedule, and we seldom shared meals either. His meals were mandated by his coach's diet plan. Our food expenses were kept separate since we ate differently, and obviously, his budget needed to be significantly larger than mine. To clarify, we consistently bought our own sources of protein. Returning to Easter, I had been away for the holiday with my family. I came back on Sunday evening at around 9 p.m. to find him meal prepping. He had a packet of chicken breast on the counter, and I immediately recognized it as mine. I inquired if it was his, and he replied affirmatively. I explained that it belonged to me, as the label was from a grocery store I frequented, which he never visited. He insisted he required it for work the following day. I reiterated that it was mine, and that I intended to prepare it the next morning for my shifts that week, then placed it back in the refrigerator. He became defensive and asserted that he needed the chicken breast. I reiterated that it was mine, and regardless of his need, it was not his to take. He quickly grew very agitated and attempted to take my chicken again. I mentioned that I would not be able to buy more in the morning because it would be Easter Monday and the grocery stores would be closed. He claimed that was the reason he could not purchase any earlier, his oversight for waiting until 9 p.m. on Easter Sunday to prepare his meals. He started to become very aggressive and panicked, saying that I knew how vital his meals were to him. I suggested he order food during work and reminded him that I was no longer obligated to assist him. I then grabbed my chicken breast and retreated to my room. This is where I made a mistake. I felt anxious because he was a large man who was becoming increasingly aggressive, and I was aware of how intense his anger could become. Hence, I hurried out of the kitchen but forgot my phone. Once I realized my phone was missing, I returned to the kitchen to retrieve it, only to find it had vanished from the counter. I asked him if he had seen it, and he denied it. I went back to my room and attempted to track my iPhone using my Apple Watch, which led to it ringing in his pocket. He refused to return it, stating he would give it back if I surrendered the chicken breast. Naturally, I declined. It was about principles. I noted that we had spent so much time arguing that he would lose the opportunity to check if any grocery stores were still open. He became angry, prompting me to return to my room to protect my precious chicken breast, only to hear the front door open and close. He took my phone with him. I called my father via a video call on Facebook Messenger and asked him to use the Find My Friends app to locate my phone. My ex had locked it in our mailbox down the street and left it there while he went on a citywide search for chicken. I searched all over for the mailbox key, but it was nowhere to be found. At this point, it was after 10 p.m. My father was concerned about my safety, and I was frantically searching my house for the mailbox key while holding my laptop in one hand and a packet of chicken breast in the other. To safeguard my chicken breast from being unjustly taken by the ogre I was cohabitating with, I locked it in the backseat of my car. It was snowing that night and sufficiently cold. When he returned home, he entered the house with his arms at his sides, with neither my phone nor the chicken in sight. I asked him again about my phone, to which he replied he would return it if I gave him the chicken. My father spoke up from my laptop, asking about the phone's location. My ex-boyfriend visibly panicked upon realizing my parents were now involved. He insisted he would not give the phone back. I then informed him I would ask my father to contact the city police regarding a domestic dispute involving stolen property, as I feared I wouldn't see my phone again because he was scheduled to work at 6 a.m., and would go to the gym after his 12-hour shift, meaning he wouldn't return until nearly 10 p.m. the next day. Yes, this was his usual schedule. My ex-boyfriend claimed that he did not think he had actually stolen my phone since he intended to return it after I provided him with the chicken breast. I pointed out that this was extortion and that regardless, he was unlawfully withholding my property. He continued to refuse. I went outside to the backyard to let my dog out before I went to sleep. My ex came out to ask where I had hidden the chicken. I reiterated that it was my chicken and that my father would be contacting the police once I was back inside. He responded that was fine and that he would simply drive to his parents' place outside the city with the mailbox key in his pocket so that I couldn't retrieve my phone. I clarified that he understood this meant he would be evading the police by leaving the city, which would require informing the provincial authorities, leading them to his parents' home. He insisted he didn't think that would happen since he did not believe he had actually stolen my phone. I became exasperated and resigned myself to asking my father to involve the authorities. When I walked back inside, he was on the verge of tears, stating he would fetch my phone upon seeing me begin to call my dad. I witnessed this grown man shuffle through the snow to the end of the block, retrieve my phone, and return it to me without once meeting my gaze. I then quickly plugged it in my room, took my dog to bed, and secured my bedroom door. 1 year later, I am still astonished by how this man justified his behavior and felt entitled to my belongings. This is merely an extreme manifestation of the behavior that led to my decision to end our relationship. Ultimately, the lesson here is to never place yourself between a bodybuilder and their chicken breast. Summary: my ex-boyfriend confiscated and concealed my phone, then threatened to evade the police due to my refusal to give him the chicken breast that I had purchased.